Hi, everyone. My name is Theodore Hum. I'm here with Mindclef. Today we have Stephanie Thompson. She was a clarinetist with the Louisiana Philharmonic, and she's also a functional nutritionist. Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Theodore, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Great. So, could you tell me what a functional nutritionist is and give us a bit of a background on what you do?
Sure. So I was trained in functional medicine and nutrition. So functional nutrition is putting those two things together. For me, it's kind of a holistic approach to food and also lifestyle factors, and how those things, impact every organ system in the body to either, promote or kind of disrupt our health. I work primarily in women's health, and I also just dedicate a branch of what I do to nutrition for musicians because that was such a huge part of my getting healthy and that sort of thing. And my background, let's see. I already mentioned I'm a clarinetist. And it's just, typical, probably typical musician driven overachiever type person. I came from a rural background, so there weren't a lot of like baked in opportunities that maybe people who are raised in a bigger city or something. So I learned pretty early to chase down, those things. So I would just call teachers or musicians that I wanted to study with, did the lessons, got the degrees, did the auditions and all of that. I got the job in New Orleans. And, even after that, with many orchestras, it's hard to make a living just with that job. So still in a position of taking every gig, taking every teaching opportunity, and still on the audition circuit. And I started having symptoms myself, some trouble with my health. But of course, going to see all the doctors, everything looks fine, your labs look good. And I was still running and doing all my stuff, but getting sicker and sicker. Luckily, I found a functional nutritionist and a naturopath and really turned my health around. And it made me want to do that for other people. So I, went back to school yet again and did my internship and spent the years doing it. So here I am.
Hmm. So, obviously, being a nutritionist, physical health is definitely something that you improve. But what about mental health? How's that affected with nutrition?
Oh, hugely mental health is affected, and I think I've been hearing people say, well, my body and my brain. Well, like those are two different things. Like, here's my clarinet and here's my flute. And it's, last time I checked, your brain is in your body. So it's, again, like the whole holistic thing. Nutrition hugely affects mental health because really mental health starts in the gut. Well, that's one place that mental health can start. Many of our neurotransmitters are made in the gut. Certain bacteria and viruses, that are in our gut can either affect anxiety and depression positively or negatively. We have to make sure that our gut barrier is intact so that things are going where they need to go, not getting out where they don't need to be. And nutrition and keeping the gut healthy is to me just really fundamental to mental health. It's a really overlooked picture of mental health, and I say that from a personal standpoint, and just from the science backs it up too.
Mhm. So, what are some examples? You mentioned the gut, or what's a way that a musician could sort of improve their health in that sense, and maybe make it like the gut less nervousness when performing, or be able to practice for longer amounts of time?
Yeah. So I feel like I've heard people say nutrition is slow medicine, and I agree with that because we can't just all of a sudden decide, oh, I have a performance. What's today? Thursday. I have a performance on Saturday. Better clean up my act. I'm going to eat some salmon and I'm going to be great. It's really a long game, and consistency is key. But when we think about the basics of nutrition, water, protein, fats, carbohydrates, like we need enough hydration. I know some people are great about it, some people are not great about it, but you know, water makes our cells able to do everything they're supposed to do. Protein to build muscle, to build the right neurotransmitters. Our brain is made of fat. We need to eat healthy fats, and carbohydrates is the fuel that our brain cells prefer. So just those very basic things, which are not complicated or hard, just take a little bit of thought. can really go a long way in allowing us to, practice more efficiently, practice, more effectively, and really keep our mood on a more even keel. So those are just basic examples.
This is sort of more of a question that's for me, but I've sort of been trying to get, a little bit more physically active
Mhm.
and, doing maybe like push-ups and weightlifting. I sort of find my muscles to be a little sore when practicing. I play the cello, and I think it definitely does affect, my tone and vibrato. Uh,
Sure.
is there a way that you can sort of like direct your nutrition to address those muscle sorenesses?
Yeah, definitely. So, one of my sort of catchphrases is like musicians are micro muscle athletes, right? We've heard of small muscle athletes, and I feel like there's not an athlete in this world, a competitive athlete, an amateur athlete, a high school athlete who doesn't consider nutrition in their training and in their performance, and we don't. So, I think we have to start looking at that. So, in your case, you mentioned muscle soreness and that sort of thing. So just like a little tip is that protein is going to be really important for you. Um, you know, so for instance, if you tolerate dairy, casein proteins are really good to help us, build the muscles, even the micro muscles that we need. That's a cofactor. We need that to build muscle. If you want to keep muscle, if you want to preserve muscle, and if you want to help with soreness, whey protein after like a workout, like you're saying, you're doing push-ups and things, whey protein can help us sort of maintain those gains and help, just help in that healing process, because we've got like a little bit of a destructive process in building muscle and a healing process. So protein's super important for that. I
You
don't
just
know if that's what you meant. I hope that helps.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Also, I think, drinking water has definitely helped me. Like, I've sort
Oh
of
yeah, hydration
those
is really crazily important. And also, hydration with the right electrolytes, right? Because we can dilute if we drink there, we can drink so much that we're diluting our own electrolytes. So making sure that we get some electrolytes in there, trace minerals, even just a little bit of salt.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, could you elaborate on that actually? So like, uh, I know.
Yeah. So we think about when we sweat, we lose a lot of minerals, right? And I know as a clarinet player, like I'm in a hot practice room, I'm going to be sweating and, all of that. It's, we think of that just as like marathon runners and stuff. But minerals are really important in how electric impulses go across our synapses. So I'm talking about things like magnesium, potassium, all of the minerals that we need. And when we drink a lot, we dilute those. We want to drink a lot, but I like to supplement with some electrolytes. And you can do that really easily just by adding a little bit of Himalayan salt, a little drizzle of maple syrup, and a squeeze of lemon to your water. And that helps because we get that little bit of glucose to help transport some of these minerals. We get the alkalinization of the lemon, and we get the minerals from the salt. So that's something that's really easy and accessible to all of us.
I want to circle back on what you were saying about how, athletes have like really care about nutrition and musicians usually don't. What's like sort of some common mistakes you see in musicians in terms of their nutrition?
That's a really good question. I feel like, oh, I'm going to call people out on this one. Mistakes. I think the first mistake is just not realizing how much it matters, and that's not any musician's fault because it's never been part of our training. But I think that because our schedules are irregular, we are on when the rest of the world is off, basically, because we push ourselves and maybe don't realize how much because of the mental health stresses. We don't we can't afford to neglect what we're putting into our bodies. So things that we tend to rely on, like convenience foods. I get why we do it because it takes time to prepare food, but it can be done, easily. But relying on too many refined carbohydrates, I think just not getting enough protein is a huge one. I see that in almost all of my clients, just not getting enough protein. Um, And those are some really common mistakes that just go back to another thing that I like to remind people is that no matter what you play, your body's your primary instrument. Like you're a cellist. Cellist is not, that cello is not going to play itself, right? I mean, you draw the bow across the strings. I'm a wind player. I have to put the column of air through the clarinet. I have to make that reed vibrate. I have to move my fingers. If you're not in your best health, you can have the greatest instrument in the world. And I think you're not going to get everything that you want out of the experience. So, yeah.
So let's say you're about to sit down to practice
Mhm.
that clarinet. Let's say you plan a 2-hour practice session with a couple breaks in between. What would you say you'd eat beforehand to increase energy for that practice session while also, I know like if you overeat, then you sort of like get a little drowsy. So what's sort of finding a good balance for that?
Yeah, so I think it's very individual. And, I know people who you mentioned a practice session, but I have colleagues who won't eat before a concert. They absolutely will not eat before a concert, which is, in my opinion, a huge mistake. But say, let's go with what you said, a 2-hour practice session with a few breaks in there. First of all, I think a balanced meal, meaning that we have protein, that we have some whole food carbohydrates, that we have vegetables, that we have fats, because we need all of those sources of energy. Because at first, right, if we need a quick burst of energy, we're going to rely on carbohydrates. And carbs are not bad. Carbs are not a bad word, but that's what we use initially. But after that, we need protein, right? Because that's more sustainable energy. We need fat for satiety, for brain health. So I think balancing that meal, what does that look like on a plate? I don't know if that's if that's a question you had for me or not, but basically it you want 50% of your meal to be some sort of vegetable type thing that you like. This is all very individual, because if I can tell someone to go eat, 3 cups of broccoli, and they're like, I'm not doing that, I don't like broccoli. So you have to find things that you like. But half your meal veggies, at least another, let's say 30% protein, and then some like good whole food carbs like quinoa, sweet potato, and maybe a little bit of butter, maybe a little bit of avocado, healthy fats, nuts, things like that. That's what's going to give you balance for a long practice session when you're sitting down to do a thing for a while. And that doesn't mean, okay, you're like, does that sound to you like a lot of food? Like, whoa, that's a lot of food. But I didn't say it had to be a 9-inch plate. You can make your meals whatever size works for you. But I think it's worth experimenting to see what feels good to you.
Right. You're talking about like the vegetables. I know there's like different, I know like corn has a different effect on the body than broccoli. What
Yeah.
other types of vegetables for that type of nutrition?
Yeah, definitely. So corn is actually a grain masquerading its little self as a vegetable. We've all come to believe that. But yeah, corn, your body reads corn like a grain. Not saying there's anything wrong with grains, but you want to know that when we're talking, veggies, we're talking things like leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, arugula, things like that. Those leafy greens and green vegetables have a lot of folate, which is a B vitamin. B vitamins are super important for mental health. Super important. We need them to make neurotransmitters. They're one of my top things that I look at for people for energy, stamina, mental health, even keel, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm, Thank you. So, getting back into like mental health and just sort of taking care of yourself. I know that a lot of orchestras that I've been a part of like to give like a little short break, uh,
Mhm.
at least depending on how long the rehearsals are.
Yeah.
I think a big part of that is to, give a little bit of a mental health break when you're spending long hours rehearsing. And last year I did an opera and we had rehearsals that were like plus like 4 hours plus. And they would even feed us during the breaks. But something I noticed that during the breaks was, they would feed us like, chips or maybe not like really bad sodas like Coca-Cola, but just sort of like, obviously it could be a lot healthier. So let's say, what would you say like the best snack to give during those orchestral breaks for those really long rehearsals, keeping in consideration that it does have to be something that like everybody also wants to enjoy and eat in a short period of time.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because the enjoyment factor is really important. I think we talk a lot about like good food, bad food, or whatever. I mean, food by itself really doesn't have any moral value. And I think, yeah, if why do we crave chips? Well, they're salty, there's a little bit of fat, they're crunchy, that they're enjoyable to eat, right? Um, are they going to give you the best bang for your buck nutritionally? No. But if you're going to go into that line and get yourself some chips, maybe also have some cut up veggies and some hummus so that you get, some fat, some protein, some vegetables that are going to be really good for your energy. Things like, I was just going to say oats, but like oatmeal bars, these are, I guess I'm thinking are you thinking in terms of like what you're going to find that you're feeding a group or what you can bring yourself? Because if you're bringing things yourself, you can have a lot of control over what you're eating at the break. Things like hard-boiled eggs, turkey jerky for protein. I mentioned hummus, which is a good healthy fat. You can have that with some kind of whole grain crackers or with veggies. Cut up fruit with a little bit of nut butter. Cottage cheese with fruit. There are all kinds of things that you can pack, grab and pack that you can buy conveniently at stores, or just, buy in bigger containers and make your own little packages of. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think, again, it's about balance. If you want to have salty chips, have some salty chips, but have also something else with them. Make sure you're getting enough hydration. Make sure you're drinking. Have some of the cut up veggies. If you want something sweet and you want to have a cookie, you know?
Well, what about in terms, as you were mentioning, of like let's say the teacher has to bring snacks. What should the teacher bring for all the students?
Oh, okay. So like you were talking about, yeah. So then if you're the one who's providing the snacks, then definitely you can bring things like unsweetened applesauce cups. You can have, oat bars, veggies, those are things that some of those things you can buy already pre-done for you. Like, here's a plate of veggies and here's some hummus. You can, pick those up at a grocery store. It's less expensive to do them by yourself. But yeah, I think you always want to look sometime, maybe a way to answer your question is you want to avoid trans fats. You want to avoid things that are excess sugars. But if you can get some fiber in there, like in a decent, like oatmeal kind of bar or something like that, I think just bringing apples that kids can eat, things like that that are easy for them to just nosh on during a break.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you. So a concert. One of my personal favorite cellists, Stephen Ischilis, he did an interview and he said that he drinks 2 cups of coffee before a concert.
Mhm.
Is that amount of coffee intake good before a concert, or does that make you maybe too jittery?
It's going to really depend on the person because we all have sort of a blueprint as to how we metabolize caffeine. Some of us are slower metabolizers, some of us are faster. It's not something that I recommend. And I also sort of feel like, at least that particular practice, I feel like if someone needs coffee, I'm speaking generally, before something like that, you might want to ask yourself why you need that coffee.
Mm.
Because to me, it points to a little bit of a deeper issue with nutrition. If you need 2 cups of coffee before a performance, no shade on this person if it works for him. Absolutely. From a nutritional biochemistry standpoint, I would have some questions about how well this person might be utilizing energy in their body. As far as the amount of caffeine goes, I'm never the person that says you must not have coffee. But if if you're someone who tends to have anxiety before performance, if you are someone who tends to rev quickly, if you are someone who tends to have problems with sleep, we might want to say, let's look at what's going on in the caffeine department and see what kind of little tweaks we can make, either timing wise or amount wise, and see if you feel better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So what is a nutrition plan you'd recommend for maybe your average client before their performance?
Um, for my average client, I don't have any average clients. So first of all, I really recommend that they, before they get to said concert or said audition, that they've experimented with how foods metabolize in their body. And that's one of the things that we start doing early on in our work together. But I really recommend balance. I recommend protein. And when I say protein, I mean lighter sources of protein before a concert, because you had mentioned before, it's like, well, if you eat too much, you get a little drowsy or whatever. Sometimes heavier things, for lack of a better word, like perhaps red meats and fattier foods, those are harder to digest and can take longer. And that's where we can start to get that lag in energy. But when we have some lighter proteins like fish or maybe chicken, and some, veggies that are cooked, or salad if you tolerate it well, the digestion process is easier, because digestion is a metabolic process, right? It requires energy. So if you're trying to like give your best performance at a concert and your body's trying to slog through a plate of fettuccine alfredo, you're probably not going to have your best energy than you would if you had lighter protein, some nice green veggies, colorful veggies to give you energy.
Do you think there's such thing as having maybe too much energy for performance?
Yes, 100%. When you say too much energy, you're talking about like feeling like this, revved? Yeah. Or are you talking about too much intake of energy, as in caloric energy?
Um, well, there's sort of a correlation between the two, right?
Um, I think you can eat a lot of calories, which is energy. Calories are energy, and those can deplete your energy if they are not the right calories. I think what you're feeling, I suspect what you're asking me is like that. Can you ever have like too much energy, like be too energized before performance? Yeah, and that's what contributes to things like performance anxiety and that sort of feeling is what I'm sort of sensing that you're asking me about, like that over energy. Yes, of course, I think we've all felt that, right? I think we all feel a little bit of this happen. If we don't feel this happening before a performance at all, then you're like, what's going on here? I think, how we frame that feeling. Is it nerves? Is it excitement? What is that feeling? But yeah, I think that goes back to the long-term plan of like, what are you eating? What kind of balanced nutrients are you putting in your body long term? Are there things that we can do like right before, a performance situation or leading up to a performance situation? Yeah, I like to use different herbs to help people feel a little bit balanced if they need that. But I think that having consistently uh, balanced energy before a performance is like a result of habits, just like practice, right? It's just like you're going to have consistently better performances if you maintain consistent practice. If you're trying to cram this right before, you're probably not going to feel your most energized yet relaxed. You're probably just going to feel a little bit panicked.
I know you were mentioning like red meat might make you have a little bit less energy, and that's like sort of what causes the drowsiness. Could that actually be a benefit in a performance? Like if let's say you have a habit of constantly being uh, overly anxious before performances, like even with a substantial amount of practicing beforehand, and
Mm.
you actually tire yourself out a little bit before um, performance. Does that work, or is that sort of counterproductive?
Yeah, I don't know. I totally see where you're going with that. Um, from a nutrition standpoint, I'm not sure if that's the strategy that I would use. I think that for what I do anyway, I think that the strategy that I use in those situations are more grounding through things like breath work. And as I said, maybe using certain herbs or essential oils. Um, I don't know. It's an interesting question that I haven't thought of. Um, it may feel grounding to some people. That's a really good question.
Right, thank you. I think it'd be pretty tricky. I mean, especially because it's person to person, right? So
Yeah, I think all of this stuff that we're talking about, Theodore, is very, very individual, which is what I love about it. I think it falls really nicely within the model that we've come up in, right? The one-to-one instruction and the one-to-one working on like our very own things that we're working on in our music, which is what I really like about the one-to-one work on nutrition. But I do think that there's experimentation and trying and practicing and tweaking and all of that in nutrition as well.
yeah, so I guess that's sort of where you would come into play, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I recently had an interview with Chris from Honesty Pill.
Yeah.
He sort of mentioned a lot of things like that he thinks that musicians should have, uh, you know, therapists, coaching, their own teachers, maybe chamber music coach. And he mentioned nutritionists, which I was sort of really caught my attention because we had our interview scheduled at that point.
Oh, okay.
So, what steps do you take with your clients?
So what steps do I take? First of all, I like to, as we do with our music students, I meet them where they are. What are their goals? What are their challenges? What are they struggling with? What's their priority? So I start with that. Um, and I work with them so that together we're kind of coming up with a plan that fits their life, that fits, you know, their their bandwidth at the moment, right? Because I can tell someone, oh, okay, remove this food, never do this again. You have to add this and take 24 supplements, which I wouldn't do. But you have to, just like with our students, I can't hand someone the Nielsen concerto before they've gotten through, other fundamentals and things like that. So we start where they are and then we go from there. Like I've had clients who have serious health issues and we start to peel back. It's like an onion. We start to peel back the layers and see what, we want to find the root cause. I've had other musician clients who are actually very healthy, but need some support and some help around how to eat well when there's so much travel involved, how to eat well when we don't have facilities to cook at the place that we're doing a festival or whatever. And so whatever they need, I try to help with.
Mm.
Yeah.
Uh, what if a musician, maybe sort of musician on the younger side, where they're not, making their own income and
Mhm.
can't necessarily afford a nutritionist? What are some alternatives that they have?
Yeah. So, well, of course, there are a lot of places online to look. Double-edged sword, right? Because there's a lot of misinformation out there too. But I will say that there are a lot of really accessible options for nutrition. Look for a nutritionist. Most all of us have a sliding scale or a scholarship program. I do that. Um, Offer to trade services. Like if you're really good at social media or whatever, you can offer to trade services, and group programs that are, a much lower point of entry where you can get, small group coaching and nutrition work for a price that you would not be able to do on a one-on-one thing. And it's kind of, again, I'm a musician, right? I get it. I think prioritizing your health, and you're so young, and I get it. It feels like, well, I can do this now, and you feel great until you don't, and then it's really hard to bounce back from that. And I just feel like, as much of, you're a cellist, so I know how expensive your instruments are. As much of an investment as that is, like your health is also an investment. And I think Chris is right. In a perfect world, it would be great if we had all those options. But that's why groups I think are important. I'm starting a group actually for musicians. But I mean the work that you're doing here, and I think just, opening up the dialogue about these things. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Before we end it up in a couple of minutes, we always like to ask our guests a couple of questions related to just mental health and
Sure.
classical music. So I was wondering, do you think there's enough mental health resources within the classical music community?
Well, enough. No, no, I don't. I think the narrative is changing a lot, like from when I was in school, even. But no, I don't think there's ever enough mental health resources. I think there's still a culture, or in the arts in general, you know, suck it up, buttercup, and that you got to be tough and thick skinned to do this. And I think that that's changing. And I think that we're starting to see that is not how you get the best artistic expression out of people. But I think it's going to take, people, students, your generation, who are, continuing to explore this topic and introducing it to more people. And I think there's been such a long tradition of it's done like this. So I went through it and now you have to go through it. And I just don't think it's bringing out the best in everybody. So no, I don't think there's enough, but I think it's changing for the better.
Are there any like specific resources that you want to see available in the music community?
That's a good question. I feel kind of lucky where I am, because here we have the New Orleans Musicians Clinic, and it's a service to musicians in the area. We have a large community of jazz musicians here, but also the classical musicians, the opera singers, everything. And their range of services is great. So I feel really lucky that we have that here in New Orleans. I know that not every place does, but it would be really nice to see nonprofits expanding in other areas to include, clinics where musicians can, see people who can attend to those issues.
Sounds good. All right. Once again, thank you, Stephanie, for your time and this interview. I think I got a lot out of it. So
Oh,
I hope
good.
the audience
Oh,
also.
good. Well, thanks for having me. This was great. I'm glad we finally got to connect here. And yeah, have a great new year. And I hope our paths cross again.
Yeah, thank you. As a
Sure.
reminder for everyone, our website is going to be in our description. We have lots of resources. This is about our, I think, sixth interview now. So there's 5 others you can check out and a lot more coming in 2023. Thank you.